Counsel, parties, and everyone watching from the galleries of this courtroom and beyond, let me make something very clear from the start. What stands before me today is not a simple case of plaint versus defendant, not merely Kim Kardashian versus whoever happens to be on the other side of the aisle, but a far larger question that has marched into this courtroom wearing designer heels and carrying the full weight of modern celebrity on its shoulders. This is fame on trial, influence on trial, the entire ecosystem of reality television, social media, brand deals, filtered images, and curated lifestyles on trial, and whether you like it or not. Kim, you are sitting at the center of it, not just as an individual, but as a symbol. Don't misunderstand me. I am not here to pretend that this room is the Supreme Court of celebrity conduct, and I am certainly not here to relitigate every rumor, headline, or whisper that's floated through the internet. Instead, this is a different kind of case, a courtroom of principle and perception. A question of what it means when a single person's image and influence grow big enough to shape how millions of young people think about beauty, success, money, and worth. You see, when you step into the public arena and build an empire out of attention, you don't just sign brand contracts and licensing deals. You sign an invisible contract with society, whether you like it or not, whether you read the fine print or not. That contract says, I will occupy space in your minds, your conversations, your aspirations, and your insecurities, and in return, I will be scrutinized, judged, imitated, criticized, and held up as an example, good or bad, of what it means to live a successful life. Today, this courtroom becomes the stage where that contract is examined. The prosecution of public concern walks in with exhibits labeled unrealistic standards, hyper, consumption, curated perfection, and the pressure to perform, while the defense walks in with exhibits labeled entrepreneurship, self-determination, branding genius, and freedom to live one's life. On one table, we have the accusation that you and the machine around you have turned life into a carefully edited show that can leave ordinary people feeling inadequate, left out, and perpetually behind. On the other table, we have the argument that you simply did what the world allowed, encouraged, and rewarded you to do. Build, hustle, promote, monetize, adapt. That you turned a spotlight into an enterprise and refused to apologize for making the most of the opportunities in front of you. And as I look at you, Kim, sitting there with lawyers on both sides, I want you to understand that in this courtroom, we are not asking whether you are good or evil. Human beings are rarely that simple. We are asking a more precise question. What happens when a person becomes a brand, when your every move is an episode, a headline, a post, a product, and the line between authentic self and curated persona disappears beneath the weight of expectation and profit? When a young girl scrolls through her phone and sees your image 1,000 times in 1,000 poses, is she seeing a woman living her life, or a standard she believes she must chase? When a young boy sees your lifestyle, the wealth, the travel, the parties, what conclusion does he draw about what success looks like and what matters most? Do we, as a culture, walk away from your empire feeling inspired, pressured, entertained, exhausted, or all of the above? These are not small questions, and I will not tolerate small answers. You sit here not just as Kim the individual, but as Kim the symbol of an entire era of celebrity, where private life and public spectacle have become indistinguishable. This courtroom may not have jurisdiction over your contracts, your networks, or your streaming deals, but it does have jurisdiction over the story we tell about responsibility, impact, and the cost of visibility. So as we proceed, do not shrink behind the language of "I'm just living my truth," or people can choose what to follow. Because while that may be legally correct, morally and socially, it is incomplete. The people can only choose from the menu they are given, and you, whether you intended to or not, helped write and decorate that menu. Today, you will listen as the case is made not about what you are legally liable for, but about what you are morally entangled with. There is no jail cell at the end of this trial, no fine from the state, no legal sentence waiting to be imposed. The only sentence that matters here is the one the culture quietly writes in its collective mind. Is this kind of fame something we should keep rewarding without question, or is it time to cross-examine the whole construct and demand something deeper, more honest, less polished from the people we elevate so high above the crowd? Now, Kim, let me speak directly to you as if all the cameras, all the followers, all the magazines and brand deals have been checked at the door, and it's just you and a judge who has seen more human mess than any reality show could ever capture. You did not stumble into fame by accident. You climbed, step by step, through a terrain of attention, opportunity, reinvention, and relentless work that most people underestimate. You took the raw material of public interest, controversy, and curiosity, and shaped it into a polished, profitable identity. You created shows, you built brands, you launched products, you became a reference point in pop culture, a name that signifies a particular kind of glamour, a particular way of living, a particular relationship between image and income. For that, your defenders will say you deserve credit, not condemnation. They will tell this court about your work ethic, your late nights, your strategic mind, your ability to adapt from television to social media, from fashion campaigns to business ventures. They will remind everyone that for every curated post, there were contracts negotiated, teams managed, projects developed, risks taken, and that none of that came wrapped in a bow. And they will be right about that much. Empire, building in any form, is no small feat. But you see, when someone becomes as influential as you, the story of their success stops being a private memoir and starts becoming a public script. People don't just watch you, they study you, copy you, measure themselves against you, even if they don't realize they're doing it. Your face and figure become a template. Your lifestyle becomes a barometer of goals. Your partnerships become silent endorsements of what is worth chasing. So, while you may see yourself as someone who simply sees the chance to build a life, millions see you as a mirror of what they feel they lack. The argument before this court is not that you set out to hurt anyone, but that the very architecture of your success leans heavily on an illusion of constant perfection, airbrushed, filtered, staged, lit, edited, and that illusion trickles down into the minds of young people who do not have your money, your access, your stylists, your surgeons, your teams. While you may well know the difference between the real you in the bathroom mirror and the you that appears in a campaign, do they? When you post a picture, do they see a human being with worries, with private struggles, with bad days and insecurities? Or do they see a standard they believe they must meet to be considered beautiful, desirable, successful? Are they told loudly and clearly that what they're seeing is an image, not an instruction? That the goal in life is not to become a carbon copy of your highlight reel, but to discover their own. No one in this courtroom is naive enough to imagine that you are personally responsible for every insecurity, every comparison, every tear behind a locked bathroom door as someone scrolls through social media and wonders, why don't I look like that? Why isn't my life like that? But the scale of your influence means that you are one of the major contributors to a cultural atmosphere where comparison becomes constant, where self-worth becomes entangled with likes, where body image is shaped not by health and function, but by what photographs well. You may argue that you've also promoted confidence, self-love, entrepreneurship, family, and resilience, that you've used your platform to highlight causes, to support justice, to show vulnerability. At times, all of those things can be true, and this courtroom will not ignore them. But dual truths exist, You can be both a symbol of empowerment and a trigger for insecurity, both an argument for owning one's narrative and an emblem of how heavily edited that narrative can become. What this court expects from you, if not an admission of guilt, is at least an acknowledgement of complexity, not a neat PR-approved statement about empowerment, but an honest reckoning with the fact that what you put into the world carries weight far beyond any one post or campaign. When you sign your name to a product, a show, an image, you are not signing in a vacuum. You are adding another brick to a towering edifice of expectations that many will try to climb with far fewer tools than you had, and so the question I put to you is not, did you mean harm? But now that you know the scale of your impact, what will you do with that knowledge? Will you continue to amplify only the glossy side of life, or will you dare to show more of the truths that do not photograph so neatly, but heal more deeply? In this courtroom, your sentence is not something I hand down. It is something you decide in how you move forward, knowing that millions are, in one way or another, watching. Let me turn now from the defendant's chair to the jury box, not the one in this room, but the invisible jury watching from living rooms, bedrooms, buses, and classrooms. The people who scroll, like, comment, share, criticize, idolize, and ridicule. You, the public, love your Judge Judy moment, your chance to see someone put under the spotlight and grilled about their choices. But before you enjoy the spectacle too much, understand this. You are not innocent bystanders in this story. You are co-authors. You are co-producers. You are shareholders in the economy of attention that made Kim Kardashian the icon before us. When you tuned into her shows, followed her accounts, bought her products, argued about her online, you were part of the machine that rewarded visibility, controversy, and glamour with money and power. You cannot now step back as if you had nothing to do with it and treat her as though she created the game alone. This courtroom sees you too. You have, for years, created the demand for polished lives, clicked on the most dramatic headlines, rewarded the most extreme transformations, shared the most sensational images. You say you want authenticity, but your behavior online often tells a different story. You scroll past the mundane, the honest, the ordinary, and lean toward the spectacular. You say you want real bodies, real faces, real stories. But the posts that hit the algorithm's jackpot are often the ones that look least like real life. So when you point a finger at Kim for representing an unrealistic standard, remember that 3 fingers point back at a culture that has cheered, clicked, and cashed in on those standards. This does not absolve her of responsibility, but it certainly complicates yours. Because if you truly want healthier role models, you have to do more than complain. You have to change what you reward. You have to scroll differently, comment differently, consume differently. You cannot ask people to risk vulnerability and then punish them more harshly for their imperfections than you ever rewarded them for their honesty. If you demand a world where influencers and celebrities show their real struggles, then you must become the kind of audience that does not turn those struggles into viral mockery. And you, media institutions, gossip sites, entertainment programs, don't think I've forgotten you. You built entire industries around amplifying every curated image, dissecting every outfit, every relationship, every sighting, turning one woman's life into a serialized saga that millions follow. You profited from every spike of drama, every rumor, every reveal, and then you acted shocked that a culture obsessed with spectacle produces people who feel pressure to constantly perform. This court sees that hypocrisy. You cannot both feed the fire and complain about the smoke. As for the younger members of this invisible jury, the teenagers and young adults who grew up online, you have my empathy because you did not choose the world you were handed. You were born into it. By the time you were old enough to form a thought about yourselves, you were already being asked implicitly to compare. with filters, with angles, with likes, with followers. When you look at Kim, you may see someone to emulate, someone to envy, someone to criticize, or someone to reject entirely. But understand this, no matter which stance you take, you are engaging with an illusion that was built by many hands, not just hers. You can choose, starting now, to engage with it differently. You can choose to follow people who make you feel less behind and more enough. You can choose to treat celebrities as human beings with flaws, rather than as punching bags or perfect idols. You can choose to direct your attention toward creators, leaders, and figures who reflect the values you say you want more of in the world. This courtroom can talk all day about Kim Kardashian, but if the jury of public opinion continues to reward the same patterns, then we will keep summoning a new defendant with a different name. The same underlying story. The person might change, the problem will not. So, jury, I ask you to deliberate not only on what you think of her, but on what your habits say about you. And now we come to the part everyone waits for in any courtroom drama, real or imagined, the verdict. But you will not hear a bailiff read out guilty or not guilty today, because the case before us does not fit neatly into those categories. This is not a robbery, not a contract dispute, not a simple claim for damages. This is a reckoning between a culture and one of its most visible avatars. If you insist on a judgment, here it is. Fame as we have constructed it is found guilty of distortion, guilty of excess, guilty of magnifying both the best and the worst in us until we can barely tell which is which. The influencer system, with Kim Kardashian as one of its leading figures, is guilty of selling curated fantasies as everyday standards, guilty of blurring the line between self-expression and self-marketing, guilty of turning human identity into a product that must be constantly optimized and sold. But the jury, the public, the media, the platforms, the brands, is guilty as well, guilty of rewarding the very things we claim to despise, guilty of consuming without reflecting, guilty of treating real people as characters in a never-ending show, and then acting shocked when they behave accordingly. And what of Kim herself, the person at the center of this spectacle? This court finds her not innocent and not condemned, but responsible. Responsible for acknowledging the scale of the power she wields. Responsible for recognizing that with influence that vast, there is more at stake than the next launch or the next campaign. Responsible for understanding that every image, every storyline, every partnership adds to the blueprint of what millions perceive as possible, desirable, admirable. Yet that responsibility is not a life sentence to shame. It is an invitation to leadership of a different kind. Imagine, Kim, if you chose to use the same strategic brilliance that built your image to gradually reshape it. Imagine if you decided to lean into more moments that show process instead of perfection, effort instead of ease, imperfection instead of polish. Imagine if you used your reach to normalize a different kind of aspiration, one that includes success and beauty, but also embraces limits, boundaries, and authenticity. You would not need to abandon glamour or achievement. You would simply need to widen the frame so that people see more than the highlights. And to the rest of you watching who may be tempted to leave this courtroom thinking, well, she's the problem, let me remind you, verdicts in this kind of case are not endings, they are mirrors. If you want less distortion, you must stop rewarding it. If you want role models who are honest, you must stop punishing their honesty. If you want a culture that values people for more than their appearance, you must resist the urge to engage with content that reduces them to just that. The platforms, too, must be put on notice. When your algorithms prioritize engagement above all else, you are not neutral. You tilt the playing field toward whatever is most extreme and attention-grabbing. You become silent partners in the very pressures this courtroom has examined. The reforms needed are not just in individuals, but in systems, in design, in incentive structures. And so, as I bang this gavel for the final time today, understand that the sentence I hand down is not for Kim alone, it is for all of us. May we place fame on probation not to eliminate it, but to monitor it more carefully, to question it more frequently, to demand more substance from it. May we, as a culture, move from simply watching to wisely witnessing, from automatic idolization or condemnation to thoughtful engagement. Kim Kardashian will leave this courtroom and return to a world that still adores, critiques, follows, and monetizes her presence. But perhaps if these proceedings mean anything, she will carry with her a sharper understanding of what her presence does to that world, and perhaps you will carry with you a sharper understanding of what your gaze does to her. Court is adjourned, but the real trial, the ongoing negotiation between fame, responsibility, and humanity, continues in every feed you scroll, every story you tell, and every standard you choose to uphold.